welcome back, everyone. So our second presentation for today, or second session presentation for today, is Kushal Shah with Software Zero-Day Discovery, a journey from main to return. So if just be aware, it's day 2 now, so you all know that we've got the Q&A tab where you can post questions throughout, and hopefully if we've got time, we'll be able to answer some questions at the end. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Kushal. Thanks, Kushal.
So, hey guys, welcome to this talk on Software Zero-Day Discovery, a journey from main to return. So my name is Kushal Arvind Shah, and I'm a senior security researcher at Fortinet's Bodyguard Labs. My work at Fortinet revolves around security research. So basically fuzzing, zero-day discovery, pen testing, forensics, and anything to do with security, also malware, but not compliance. So I found several bugs, several zero-day vulnerabilities in popular products like Microsoft Office, Google Chrome, Adobe Reader, Adobe Photoshop, and other companies' products as well. And I'm an alumni of Rochester Institute of Technology, and you can reach me on Twitter at KushZeroZone. So why this talk? Well, so like I mentioned before, I was able to find numerous vulnerabilities in popular products over the past 5+ years. And despite several advancements in technology and softwares and mitigation, there are zero days everywhere. Like each of the products we use and everywhere we look. So I felt it was a time like I could share a generic overview as to how do you go about finding such vulnerabilities instead of a deep dive into a particular exploit or just sharing a new kind of a fuzzer. So today's agenda. So what is a zero-day vulnerability? In case some of you guys don't know, how do we find recent zero-day vulnerabilities and their POCs? Which targets to select? How do we build them and how do we use them? How do we find corpus, basically input for the selected targets? And a brief intro on the methods like fuzzing or reversing. And lastly, we'll be looking at how do we find vulnerabilities by neither fuzzing nor reversing, basically doing nothing, zilch, and still finding vulnerabilities in popular products. And I'll be showing a demo on the last neither approach. So what is a zero-day vulnerability? A zero-day vulnerability is basically, in layman terms, it's something that has not been fixed by the developer, by the maintainer. It could be a vulnerability that some researcher is sitting on. It could be something that is being used by malwares, which is actively being exploited by malwares. And it could also be something that the developers know about it, but they don't want to fix it. They think it's too small an issue to fix. So basically something that's not fixed yet. And a vulnerability that is made public, which is known, is called an N-day or a 1-day. And these vulnerabilities can be in anything that we use. It can be in firmware, software, web applications, hardware these days, and basically any kind of aware. So where do we find recent zero-day vulnerabilities and POCs? There are many places that we can find these. Some vendors publish their zero-day vulnerabilities and some don't. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Apart from that, you can also check open source bug trackers, and they also provide vulnerability details and POC files. Several researchers, they publish zero-day vulnerabilities and POC details and vulnerabilities on GitHub, and you can use that to find. So let's see where we can find such zero-day bugs. So over here, you can see the Google Chrome bug tracker. And if you just search all issues, if you just select all issues and you search for reward, status equals to fixed, you'll find all the external researcher reported vulnerabilities in Google Chrome, which have been fixed and which have been rewarded. Many of these have the POCs inside, and they can help you either reproduce an older vulnerability in older version of Chrome, or it can be used for as a seed file for your fuzzing initiative against the latest version. You can also search for some specific vendor which has reported vulnerabilities in Google Chrome. Like over here, if you just search ZDI-CAN, you'll find all the zero-day initiative related vulnerabilities which have been reported to Google Chrome. As you can see over here, you have CVE 2020-8835. So that's some Linux related vulnerability in the Chromium OS, in the kernel. and you can find details on that, and you can also find POC files inside to reproduce it. So this is one place which you can use. Apart from this, Google also maintains many other projects like PDFM, which is the PDF engine, Skia, which is the 2D engine, WebM, which are like the graphic formats and video formats that Google maintains, Libangle, Boring SSL. There are tons of such open source projects that Google maintains. And you can also look into these, and there will be some bugs which have been reported, which don't make it to the Google Chrome bug tracker, but they can be further researched, and they can be further tested to find vulnerabilities in the Chrome browser. And also, one other thing I noticed was many times these bugs, they don't make it to Google Chrome in the current version, but the software, the browser is constantly updated. So a vulnerability in one of these projects could also impact Google Chrome maybe 1 year down the line or later. So that is something that we can always use. Over here, we have, like I mentioned before, the PDF engine. So you can see over here, this bug did not make it to the Chrome bug tracker, but the details of the vulnerability in the PDF engine and the POC file can be downloaded freely, easily from the PDF bug tracker, PDFM bug tracker. And this can be used for fuzzing as a seed file. Similarly, over here, you have the Skia engine, the bug tracker for that. And you can find the vulnerability details, the steps to reproduce, and the POC file. So this can also be used for further fuzzing the Skia engine and indirectly fuzzing the Chrome browser using this engine. So like I mentioned before, there are many GitHub repositories where researchers publish their POCs and vulnerability details. So this over here is one very nice repository, which has all the JavaScript engine related vulnerabilities, which have been reported by external researchers. You'll find vulnerability details and POCs on there. And it's not specific to just one engine. You have Chakra Core for Microsoft Edge, V8 for Google Chrome, JSC for Mozilla Firefox, etc. So you can find all these vulnerabilities, and you can understand how they work and everything. And you can use that to find vulnerabilities yourself. This is another repository for all the ZDI related vulnerabilities. It's not specific to just a browser, and there are vulnerabilities for SCADA and other applications like Drupal and all those. So you can find other targets, vulnerabilities and POCs as well. So target selection and how do we build or use them? So today there are like tons of softwares, and they are being actively developed, and they support a lot of formats and features and everything. So how do we select a good target? Well, the first thing that we can look is what are the big security players, like big security companies, interested in. So let's see. So you have, for that, you can go to ZDI. They have their own advisories. And you can see over here, they have Horner, Adobe Reader. So Horner is some SCADA company. Adobe Reader is the famous Adobe Reader. So you can find what are these companies interested in, what have they recently researched, and that can help you identify your target as well. Similarly, Cisco Talos is another, and they also publish their vulnerability advisories, and you can select which targets you want to research over here as well. Flexera Secuna is another. They also publish their advisories, and you can select from here as well. You'll notice most of these companies, they have different targets. Like Cisco Talos is into mostly web applications and IoT devices, and Flexera is into obscure formats that are not known and kernel. So like Oracle Outside In and Linux kernel. So each one has their own target field which they're interested in, and you can select from any of these. Similarly, you have Fortinet advisories, and you can select targets from here as well. So apart from the big security companies, there are vulnerability brokers and exploit brokers like Zerodium, Exodus, and they also publish the targets that they are interested in. So if you find a vulnerability or exploit in them, they are willing to pay you for that, and that is something that they are actively interested in. You have browsers, operating systems, you have routers, mobile applications, softwares, etc. So you can just select from this as well. So we saw what top security companies are interested in, what vulnerability brokers are interested in, and but is that something that is the only thing that we should be looking at? Maybe, maybe not. So you can target other products and other applications as well. But should you? So that question can be answered by two bugs that I've recently seen. One was the $100,000 C-Aries vulnerability in the Google Chromebook, which was basically a DNS library which was exploitable, and there was a vulnerability in it which was easily exploitable, and the researcher was paid $100,000 for that. So that shows you like that's an open source library, nobody's tested it, and someone just thought of looking into it and found something. So that is one way to go about it as well. And recently there was a vulnerability in Facebook, also in WhatsApp, and it was a GIF related vulnerability, the GIF format. So that was using an open source library which was freely available on GitHub, and you could have easily tested it, and you could have found, and I could have impacted WhatsApp, which is like a billion or 2 billion users. So you can select other targets. So let's see how do we find less popular targets. So this website is pretty interesting. It's called file-extensions.org, and it gives you information on all different kinds of formats like graphics, video, documents, etc. So over here, you can see all the graphic-related formats. You have EPS, GIF, etc. So all the formats which are graphic related, you'll find information on that. And if you just select one of those, like over here, I've selected CDR, which is the format for CorelDRAW. So you'll notice that, okay, this format is opened by which application opens it, which application allows you to view it, which application imports it, exports it, etc. So that can identify, like basically any vulnerability or exploit, it needs an input, a user-driven input, right? So this gives you that information, which targets using this format you can select. Also, once you click on that format, that application, it will show you that it's not just CDR. That was just the default application. You can have tons of other formats which are supported by this application, and most of them are not heavily tested. It is like only the famous one, only the proprietary or the common one is tested, and the other obscure ones are not heavily tested. So it's very easy to find a vulnerability in that, and that can exploit the application itself. If you click on the company name, it will show you that CorelDRAW Graphics Suite was just one application. There are several other applications which the company provides. So that is another way to, to maximize your attack surface and everything. So let's say that, and most often, basically, the reason is that most often the parser for that format is common across all the softwares. So if you find a vulnerability in product A, it could affect product B, product C, product D. So even if there are like maybe 10 million users of product A, there could be like 10 million other users each for other products. So in a way, you are impacting 50 million users instead of just 10 million. That is another way that you can maximize your impact for that just one vulnerability that you find. So these are like the common ones, but you can also find obscure formats. So today, like nation state actors are targeting other nation state actors. With COVID, you have phishing related emails and all sorts of things. So most often it's an attachment which you open, and that will try to take over, run something else, and it will try to take over your system. So when you are targeting other countries and all, like that's one thing that you don't want to, either you make it generic or you make it specific. So there are so many languages across the world. Just continuing on that, this application, this format, HWP, that's related to the Hangul language, which is used in South Korea. And South Korea has it's got its own Microsoft Office. It's called Hancom Office. So they have their own applications which support this format, and you just see over here that, okay, it's going to, this format is can be opened by Hancom Office, and yeah, so that would impact those users only, not other users. Similarly, you can also see Japanese word processor. Just search on Google, Japanese word processor, Polish word processor, Chinese word processor, and you'll find several applications which are like not so famous, but they are dedicated to that particular language and that particular format. So you can target those as well. So we found such obscure formats, such obscure products, such obscure companies. but should we target them or not? So this website is called Owler.com. It gives you information on the company and the product and who are the competitors and all sorts of things. So over here, you can see that this company, NJStar, it's got an annual revenue of 28 million. So, okay, so they are active. This data is not that old. So they're getting this much revenue. That means that they are paying customers, and that means that it has a user base for that format, that software, and indirectly for that format. So that is something that helps you identify, is this company in active development? If I find a vulnerability, will they fix it? Do they really is it something that they will be interested in fixing or not? So that helps identify if you should research into this product or not. Similarly, it's not just obscure. This is just Adobe. You can see 10 billion. It's definitely not 10 billion now, but you can see that, okay, it gives you information on not just obscure, but even well-known companies. And that will help you identify if that's something that you should research into or not, the products of that company. So that was just the prominence of and worthiness of that company. But should you find a vulnerability in that product or not? So this website is called VulDB, VULDB.com, and it gives you information on particular exploits or particular vulnerabilities and what its value was when it was a 0-day, what its value is when it is an end day today. So let's say you found a vulnerability in Hancom Office, and you didn't find, but you actually wanted to research into it. So what you do is you just look up old CVE IDs for that application, and you come across one CVE for 2015, and you just search it in this, and it will tell you that, okay, what is the exploit worth? And that can give you a better idea as to should you find vulnerabilities today in this application or not. So that is for the vulnerability worthiness. So we saw what applications we want to target, where do we find recent 0-day vulnerabilities, and then we can go into target building and usage. So today there are only two kinds of softwares. One is open source and one is closed source. For open source, you can use different kinds of methods to build your application. For closed source, you just have to use debug assistance tools to build to test your application. So we'll just go into that. So over here, you can see for open source, there are multiple options. You can use a custom compiler like AFL, AFL Smart, libfuzzer, CLang, LLVM, etc. You can also use compile time flags like sanitizers, address, memory, thread, undefined, and also recently there is a new sanitizer called control flow integrity, which can also net you some vulnerabilities. So you can use those. You can use shared libraries like libdislocator, which comes shipped in with AFL for address allocation. And you can also modify the fuzzing approach. Like you can just modify the source of the application so that it will not close the application, and you can just open it once and continue running all your fuzzing operation throughout. That helps you. So these are the ways you can build your open source. And there are some options for that. If you're using sanitizers, you can use the sanitizer related options, because many of these options are not enabled by default. So you might miss out on some vulnerabilities which would not be reflected by the fuzzer. And you can also use Valgrind for if you're building it without the sanitizers. So it will identify out of bound reads, out of bound writes, and that will also help you identify vulnerabilities which would otherwise have gone, you would have missed them. So that is open source. For closed source, you don't have the source code, you can't build it, but you can use some tools to enhance it, to enhance your approach for finding vulnerabilities. So there are two ways that you can test closed source applications. Before it was that you were just testing the whole application, but today there are a few tools like WinEFL and Dynamic Rio, which you can use for testing just a specific DLL, not the whole application, but just one particular component if you're targeting a particular set of formats. So in this case, I've mentioned over here, you have Adobe Photoshop. So Photoshop comes in, it's like I showed, showed you before, it comes in with, it supports a lot of formats. So you can target a specific plugin DLL extension, and just focus on that. Or you could target the whole application. So, and they're very easy to identify. The name itself gives away the format it supports. So you have JPEG 2000 that supports JPEG 2000 format, DCOM for DCOM. MMX Core is a set for like 10, 15 formats which it supports, and you can just open the application in the debugger and identify which plugin supports it, and then correlate the format to the plugin. So that's not that difficult. You can also check for what all input and import functionalities the application provides you and which formats it supports. Disabling autosave, welcome splash page, and all those, if that option is given to you by the application, then that is definitely going to help you. The other thing is that you need to enable page heap and G flags on the target. You can enable full page heap or use a stack trace individually, or you can just do /full. So this will help you identify if any application is trying to access some memory which is not within its bounds, which is not supposed to access. So if there are some pages it tries to access, it will automatically alert you. So that is one way that it will help you for closed source. So we saw what applications, what targets other people are researching in, how do we find such targets, how do we build or use them. But then if you want to use them, we need some input, right? So where do we get such input? There are multiple ways. So one is that the application, you just install it and it comes, it saves some files in documents or program files directory for the application, and you find some over there. Or that format is common across multiple applications. They provide some seed data. If it's neither, if you don't get data from input data sample files from any of these, then there are some other ways as well. So we'll just look at what that is. So this is the Google open source project, OSS files. So they provide a corpus or corpora that you can download and you can use. Along with this, you also have corpus on GitHub repositories. This is provided by Mozilla Security, and they provide their own set of corpus which they have developed and generated, and you can use that too. You can also do Google Dorking. You can use file type, whatever format, extension, and just try to find files like that. Google Dorking is just one. You can also do Yandex. MIME application PDF is the way they find PDF formats. So Google Dorking, Yandex, DuckDuckGo, Bing, there are tons of search engines, and you can, or Baidu, and each of them will index some set of pages, and there will definitely be some things which are missed out. So you can, if you want to have a whole, if you want to encompass a large set of data, then you can try all of them. Wikimedia is another, which is often overlooked. This place you can find media-related formats, video, audio, and animation, and it is quite big, and you'll find tons of data on this. So we saw search engines, we saw Wikimedia, but the world did not start off with search engines. Everyone just stops there because Google and everything came about in like early 2000s, but we had internet way before. So there was something that people were using even much earlier. That is FTP engines, FTP servers. So there are some websites which give you FTP search engine options. You can just search the format like over here, and it will give you all the FTP servers which have PDF files. And the best part about it is it has no limit. You can download as much, all the files if you can. And these are most often definitely not covered by the search engines, because the search engine cannot index every FTP file format, and they are missed out. So you might come across some seeds which will help you. So that is if you want to find existing formats, existing files, and there is a way to to get that for your fuzzing, for your research. Let's say you came across, there are two ways that can happen. Either you have a lot of files or you have very less files. So if you have a lot of files, you can reduce your corpus. You have tools like AFL, Tmin, AFL, Cmin, and all those. There are two ways. Either the number of files is huge, then you can reduce that so that you don't have redundancy. If you have a bigger file, then you can reduce that to a smaller file by removing all the excess data from within that and just keep the syntactically relevant data inside. That will help you for parsing, basically the time required to parse that individual file. So this is code coverage, and you can also, if you don't have a lot of files, one way that I do is that I use dumb fuzzers like Radamsa, Zuzuf, and several others as dumb fuzzers. So basically, you just fuzz the small subset initially. You get a big set of files, and then you actually use that for your for your real fuzzing session. So that way, you have a lot of files at the start to begin with. Not always helpful, but sometimes it really helps. There are several other tools. Yeah, so tools I mentioned before: Peach Fuzz Minimizer, Faux Minimizer, and AFL Tmin, AFL Seaman. Other approach is that you want to generate files because so the way it works is that the file format, it has a lot of options. If you just take PDF, PDF has one from version 1.2 to 1.7, and now PDF version 2.0. So they have lots of built-in features that it supports for the PDF reader, but not all of those are actually used in your day-to-day life. So many of these are missed out if you're just using the regularly found files for your research. So you can generate files also. If you know the file structure, like the header, footer, and what is the content of the body, then you can generate files on the fly for your fuzzing or for your research. So that is also helpful if you know the file format structure or specification. So this is a very well-known fuzzer, AFL, and I won't be explaining as to what each of the options over here mean, but there are some ways to enhance it to make it better because it is people call it a evolutionary, but I call it a revolutionary fuzzer because it changed the entire landscape for fuzzing and for zero-day discovery. And it is a dumb fuzzer, but it's the smartness is that it is actually doing feedback driven. So it's not all that dumb, and it can give you a lot of good results because it's feedback driven. So there are some ways that you can use AFL to enhance. I'll just be sharing those. You can use the dirty mode to skip bit flips and byte flips. That way you will get faster results, but you might miss out on some bit flips and byte flips, which could cause some crashes. You can add a custom dictionary, which will help generate smarter files from the fuzzer because it knows the dictionary, the syntax of that format. You can use power schedule mode for efficiency because of the CPU usage. For if you're running multi-core, then that will help you for power scheduling. Lib dislocator library for putting pages between the memory for that application. Sanitizers, like I mentioned before, compile time and runtime. And the one good thing that I use is the master slave mode. So there are multiple fuzzers these days, right? So you can use one fuzzer on one core, second on another, third on another. Or if you don't have a multi-core, you just have one core, that's also fine. But the way this works is that the data from one fuzzer, generated files, will be passed on to the other two or other three, and vice versa. So this way, if AFL is not able to reach that particular code, that particular file, generate that particular file in 10 minutes, and libfuzzer is able to, libfuzzer will pass that on to AFL, and AFL can continue working from there on forward. So that way, it is very helpful. And the chances of finding vulnerabilities faster is very high with this approach. So another thing is reversing. I won't be going into details because this is a whole new thing altogether. But if you're doing research, the way this works is that you can find specific sections of code if you want to just fuzz that for your fuzzing, or if you want to change the application flow, you can remove some code, and it will actually stop the application and make your research faster because if you're doing fuzzing. So that way, WinAFL is another one which relies on reversing. You know which function you want to target, which particular offset, and that will help you find vulnerabilities faster instead of launching the whole application under some pin or something. So that helps out. And lastly, if you want to find vulnerabilities by neither fuzzing nor reversing, so many researchers, they think that they are too smart or they're too lazy, and they don't want to fuzz, which is not that difficult. You just let it run, or they don't want to reverse, which is going to be time consuming, but they don't want to do that. So they are too lazy or they're too smart. So they want to find vulnerabilities still. So how do you do that? Well, you have open source applications and libraries to the rescue, and you have the target's support or user forums to the rescue. So you'll find a lot of vulnerabilities just lying out in the open, and you can use that. So I'm just going to be showing you a demo on how I found like almost 15 vulnerabilities in a popular product, which is used by millions or maybe a billion plus users, and by neither fuzzing nor reversing. So yep, I'll just move on to my virtual machine. And yeah, so this vulnerability was in Photoshop, out of Photoshop, and I found 6 of them lying around, out of bound reads, out of bound writes, and from the ones which did not work, I just used it for my fuzzing session, and they turned out to churn out even more vulnerabilities. So if we just run it, you can see. I'll show you how I found this, which was the coolest part, because I didn't do anything to find them, at least half of them. So, yep, so the application is running. Okay. So Photoshop crashed. Okay, don't send. We just run it inside the debugger. Just to identify if it's what kind of a vulnerability it is. Because it can be just a denial of service or a Stack Overflow, and that doesn't count as a vulnerability because you can't play around with the memory. So yep, so we went to this, and that's when it crashed, right? So we see, okay, the first chance exception. Let's proceed. Second chance. But I want to see what it is. Is it an out of bound reads, out of bound write, or just a Stack Overflow, or what? Didn't outright tell us a 409 for a buffer overflow, or any of those, or a 374 for a heap corruption. So that's definitely not that, but it could be an out of bound read or an out of bound write. So we just look at that. Yeah, I've used WinDBG 6.1, 11. That's an older version, but you can use the latest version also. So that gives you better information in the debugging session. So yeah, so it shows you out of bound write. It's an invalid pointer write. This is the plugin, standard multi plugin, which supports multiple formats. If you see here, it attempted to write to this particular address, which it was not supposed to. And if you use the bang exploitable, it's heuristic, but it will tell you, okay, it's exploitable. It's just a fancy way of understanding. Otherwise, you'll know from the top itself that it's out of bound right. So this was in Photoshop, and not this one. So this was out of bound right. There were reads, writes, everything. So how did I find this? That's the multi-dollar question, right? A $1 million question. So if you see here, so all I did was, like I showed before, file-extensions.org. My target was Photoshop. So I know Photoshop uses PSD. That is the default file format for Photoshop. So you just open that. It says, okay, default to open is Photoshop. Click on Photoshop.
My apologies, Kushal. We might have
similarly, Photoshop also supports all these formats. So I just searched for EXR. Okay, that's here. So just click on that, and it says that EXR can be viewed by Photoshop, and it can be opened by Photoshop. Okay, fine. But this is not a common format. It's not a popular format, right? So the next thing I did was open EXR GitHub. Just search for any open source library which supports this. I came across this. went to issues for the closed ones, just search for overflow. Okay, so there are multiple issues which have been reported. If you click on one, if you open a few of them, okay, POC, fine, POC,
We might have to wind it up there. Thanks, Kushal.
okay.
We're running
So
a little bit
these
over.
all were reported in the open source project, and they had the POCs also available. So you can, all I did was just use that readily available vulnerability in a popular target, and fine, I'm affecting a million, like 100 million users, and this needs to be fixed. So basically just vulnerability reuse in a way. And this is just for one format. I found 6 vulnerabilities readily working on Photoshop, and for the others, I just used that for fuzzing it further, and they turned out to net me 10 other vulnerabilities. So in all, I had like 15 to 16 vulnerabilities which I reported to Photoshop, and they fixed it within a few months. So that was just Photoshop, and that was just one format. Like that, there are, as you saw, there are numerous formats and numerous applications. So it's all up for grabs. So that's all I wanted to share. And any questions?
Unfortunately, we won't have any time for any questions. We're going to have to move on to our next session. So we'll call it there, and we'll pause for a moment, guys, and we'll be coming back with Anthony Caruana with mitigating the risks during disaster. Thanks very much, Kushal.